Last time on D&D, featuring Calliope Laurelleaf, the Halfling Bard, Ellie Jobel, the Gnome Ranger Rogue, Phelan, the High Elf Cleric, Calorin, the Wood Elf Ranger. Absent this session, Trogdor, the Red Dragonborn Barbarian. Also absent this session, Twerpo, the Hill Dwarf Wizard, and Alric Lysane, the Human Fighter. Session 8, Murder at Maplestone Manor. Alright, this one is going to be a long one. So what I did with this session is I had the map face down. So when the players came, we brought food and everyone was eating, having a really good time. Socialized, talked for a good half hour, and then I said, hey, when everyone's ready, let's flip the map over. And when the map was flipped over, everyone quickly realized that all the rooms that were on this map were references to Clue, the board game. So I used the various rooms from different versions of Clue. There have been like the European version that had different names for rooms, and they've done like Clue expansions where they've added rooms. I pretty much put almost all the rooms on this map. This whole session was a absolute blast. It was pretty much a murder spree, find out who's doing it, why they're doing it kind of thing. Ton of NPCs to interact with and all this other stuff. This is one of those sessions that I do wish we had recorded, but back then this was just all live, so there was no recording for this one. But I am going to go through the number of things that happened because I took really good notes for this session as the players were moving about, doing different things. So if you're ready to buckle in for a longer one than normal, we'll go ahead and get started on last time on D&D. The party successfully escorts the caravan to its first major stop, which is a major city known as Ridgecrest. Ridgecrest is a major city structure and the largest known on the continent. Split into 3 divisions, there's High Ridge, Mid Ridge, and Low Ridge. Each represents a society class. High Ridge is for the rich, Mid-Ridge is for the middle class, and Low Ridge, as you can guess, is pretty much the slums. Ridgecrest is built on a hill, so that High Ridge sits at the highest point. It basically lays up against a mountain, allowing basically all the waste to literally roll downhill, typically through the pipes and the sewer systems, dumping out into, yes, Low Ridge. So the party moves about High Ridge looking for supplies, with Ellie meeting Argar Fireaxe, a dwarf weaponsmith, who sells her 2 magical daggers at a very discounted price. Calliope meets Thyre Moonglade, a high elf, at his store while looking for painting supplies. Alaric went into a tavern with Trogdor and met a creature behind the bar, and despite both of their travels, they'd never seen one before. It is a creature known as a Tortle, which is a humanoid turtle who stood over 6 feet tall and spoke extremely slow. So when I basically role-played as a turtle, everything he spoke as was generally very slow, and so that made it very fun. So when they were trying to order drinks and just trying to rush him through, he was always being very slow. Ellie also stopped by Furryfoot's costumes and picked up a disguise kit, which had 5 uses. She used one on herself to imitate the people of High Ridge, and doing an amazing job rolling a natural 20 on her performance, which increased her charisma to 18 while disguised to the people of High Ridge. Her stunning beauty and the way she carried herself allowed her to convince Marcus to allow her to bring her Mastiff, a pet that she had just recently attained, named Bubbles, who was wearing a fake rhinestone necklace, to the party. The rest of the party eventually meets Marcus Maplestone, a human who insists that they all attend his great gala party as a means of thanking them for helping escort the caravan and bringing him and a relic that he has aboard the caravan safely to his manor. Marcus has purple hair, dyed, not natural, and wears a monocle which he constantly adjusts. All of his gestures and speech are clearly over the top. He assures them that the party will have free drinks, free food, and some exotic things. He does tell the party that for the safety of everyone, no armor, no weapons can be brought to the party. The captain of the caravan, a gentleman by the name of Darathan Moonglade, tells the party that Marcus has been wanted for illegal activities for a long time. However, many people in High Ridge are in his pocket and never turn against him. So he recommends going to the party and helping find clues that could be used against Marcus, and if need be, try to smuggle small weapons such as daggers just in case. Trogdor had no interest in fancy parties as a barbarian and returned to the tavern. while Talaran, also having no interest in being social at a party, just went outside the town and began scouting around, just taking place in nature. This was basically a way to explain how those two who were not present as players would not partake in the adventure. Everyone manages to smuggle in a dagger except for Calliope, who is caught and explains that she had forgotten it was there. At the party, they meet a laundry list of interesting individuals, and I'm going to go through that list for you. No need to write these down or memorize them. What happens to some of them will be mentioned in these notes. So there's Brekar, Farrunner, a human male. Blonde hair, blue eyes, a scar over his right eye. He sings and hums frequently, has a romantic beef with Solana. Solana Brightblade, a human female with brown hair, green eyes, long, single ponytail. She speaks a number of languages, and she is the former lover of Brekar. Shala Serpentbane, a human female with brown hair, green eyes, a serpent tattoo on her arm, draws beautifully, business partner with Thyre. Varu Sunborn, a Aasimar male with blonde hair, blue eyes, and colorless pupils. He sings beautifully, but he is envious of Ella. Then we have Trella Nightbreaker, an Aasimar female, blonde hair, green eyes, nicely dressed. She drinks anyone under the table, and she's basically known for being an armor merchant. There's Zamar Silvercrown, a dragonborn male with silver skin, yellow eyes, blind in his right eye. He's an expert dart thrower and a former romance of Baldara. So next we have Baldara Faircircle. She's a dragonborn female, bronze skin, yellow eyes, and she's quite fashionable. She's a skilled actor and a former lover of Zarmarsh. And then we have the person that Ellie met previously. There's Argar Fireaxe, a dwarf male with red hair, green eyes, a trimmed beard. He is an expert weapons maker. And then there's Thelmus Ironstone, a dwarf male with red hair, blue eyes, tends to slur his words. He's an expert armor maker. He has a beef with Trella, who has cheated on him. And then there is Morena Forgemaker, a female dwarf with red hair, green eyes, iron bracelets. She has kind of a whispery voice, and she has a beef with Zar. There's Thorkona Hammerside. She is a female dwarf with brown hair, green eyes, and a hammer necklace. She fidgets with her necklace repeatedly, which is very noticeable. And then there's Ella Moonglade. She is a female high elf. She has blonde hair, green eyes. She's very nicely dressed. Voice sounds like music. And she's suspicious of Tauren's actions. You have Thyre Moonglade, who's a high elf, which is who Calliope met previously. He is a male with purple hair, green eyes, he's nicely dressed, paints beautifully, business partner of Shala, envious of Ella. And then you have Mars Fallenstar, who is a male high elf, green hair, green eyes, smiles constantly, stares off in the distance, generally kind of untrusting of everyone. You have Gorfel Boomstick, a male gnome with white hair, blue eyes, raggedy clothes, nose twitches frequently, and has a romantic interest in Daisy. You have Thorin Stonepassage, a half-elf male with blonde hair, blue eyes, hair in 3 braids. He paces frequently, and it's very noticeable. He's quite jumpy at everything, and he tends to randomly just talk to himself. And then you have Morobunts Hillshire. He's a male halfling with brown hair, brown eyes. Very curious fellow. He sings, but rather horribly, and he's envious of Varu and Ella. Then you have Daisy Hillshire, who is a female halfling. She has black hair, brown eyes, and she's also curious, extremely social, suspicious of everyone, which is why she's so social. She's basically trying to figure out everyone's motives. You have Talaris Hopebringer, who's a male tiefling with black hair, green eyes, with cat-like pupils, very stoic, suspicious of Thorin, and thinks he's up to something. And then you have Umpra Greenshell, who is a turtle male. Green skin, yellow eyes, talks very slowly. Then there is Zar Wavenraker, who is a female triton with blonde hair, blue skin, blue eyes. She speaks very softly. Then you have Ebonhawk Slingblade, a human male with brown hair, brown eyes, very, very arrogant, speaks of his heroic deeds repeatedly, and he has a strong dislike for the tiefling Talaris. There is Narrowway Stonecutter, who's a female gnome who has blonde hair, blue eyes, a shamrock necklace, and she's kind of one of those everything is beautiful and very optimistic, perhaps too much so. And then you have Bloom Furryfoot, who is a female gnome with black hair, black eyes, dressed in leathers, and she is very suspicious of Ebonhawk. And then you have Rose Flamestrike, who's a female gnome with blonde hair, blue eyes, red and black mage robes, believes Bloom stole an heirloom of hers. And then you have Forge Ironbeard, who's a male dwarf. He has brown hair, brown eyes, braided beard, nice clothes, wears a symbol of his god around his neck. And then you have Galen Silverglade, who's a half-elf male with brown hair, hazel eyes, thin beard, wears all green, speaks of his deeds when prompted. And then you have Thurg, a human male with brown hair, brown eyes. He's a Northman, which means he's a barbarian. He wears rags, ill-spoken, known to be a bit of a hero. And then you have Aerith Banetricker, a female elf with blonde hair, one blue eye, one green eye. She speaks eloquently but dislikes humans in general. And then you have Renna Foxhair, a female human with red hair, green eyes, orange robes. She has a very noticeable, cunning smile, and she's not very trusting of Ebonhawk. This is information the party was just gathering throughout the event as we're kind of moving about this large manor. During dinner, all the employees come out in leather-clad S&M type outfits, and they serve the guests whatever they need. So it's very clear that this individual who is running this party has a very hedonistic attitude. In an attempt to gather information on Marcus, the party splits up and begins talking to a number of the other patrons in the party, now seeking to be more prying towards finding out how they know Marcus, what they're doing here, like what their business is with Marcus and stuff like that, rather than just trying to find out more about each individual. Seeing Thyre Moonglade at the party, Calliope approaches him and explains how happy she is to see him at the party. Using her charisma, which she has ample amounts being the bard, she spoke to Thyre about Marcus and some of the things she had heard but kept it very vague. Drawn to Calliope, both because of her natural beauty and her ability to sing and write, the artist in Thyre felt compelled to speak to her. He pulled her aside and explained what she's heard is true, where Marcus trades in various things. Some of it is like illegal paintings that have been smuggled. Sometimes it even involves trading people. Supposedly, something like that will be happening at tonight's party. He also knew that Marcus was into acquiring items from various places, even going as far as stealing sacred documents just to have them and just to own them. He led Calliope to the library where he showed her rows of ancient texts and books that he knew Marcus had stolen. One row of books, 12 volumes in all, caught Calliope's attention. The spines had a language she had not seen before, and just as being a bard, that kind of interested her. She seduced Thyre as a distraction, and while enjoying themselves, she managed to basically steal the book, put it under her pile of clothes, and when she got dressed, she was able to basically smuggle it and basically get out of the room with it. And Thyre, before letting her go, quickly grabbed her arm and says, "Hey, Ella must not learn of what we've done tonight." And he indicates that basically Ella is not his sister, but his wife. And as Calliope looks, because she had run into Ella at the party, realizes that Ella is looking around, probably looking for her husband. Marcus called everyone into the ballroom and displayed a cat-like humanoid creature he called a tabaxi. This was clearly what Calliope had heard that Marcus was known to do. The tabaxi was something that none of the party had ever seen before, and most of the people at the party had not seen before, except for a few who had attended Marcus's party before. Marcus immediately explained that this female tabaxi was up for sale, and that he was selling her as a slave. The bids were pouring in immediately, though not everyone participated. Some were clearly horrified at the idea of a slave trade, but tolerated it because they wanted to remain a part of the in-crowd and be a part of Marcus's crowd. Another twist would happen, which interrupted the slave purchase, a scream from the dining room. Torpo and a few others ran back into the dining room to see a dead body on the table. The Aasimar, Trella Nightbreaker, lay murdered. Torpo attempted to steal the dagger that was still in Trella's body and give it to Calliope. However, in attempting to do so, she rolled a critical fail. The dagger slipped from her hand, from the blood, trickled, hit the bench, landed on the floor with a clink, 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 clink. This caught the attention of several partygoers who were now convinced that she was trying to hide the murder weapon. The crowd was quickly turning on Torpo. One of the party patrons, Torrance Stone Passage, placed his hand on her forehead and verified by glimpsing 30 minutes into the past that she was not lying. She had not done it. However, there was the tall Northman, Thurg, who was not convinced. He believed that they were basically covering for one another. During the distraction, Ellie attempted to pick the locks from the restrained Tabaxi, but could not. She promised the Tabaxi, who she was surprised could speak common, that she would return to free her before this was over. Ellie examined the dagger and noticed that something unusual. Blue blood was on the hilt. That was not the Aasimyr's blood. That was clearly the blood of a Triton. Tritons had blue blood, but there was only one Triton at the party. That would be Zar. They glanced around, and Zar was not to be found in the dining room where everyone had gathered after the murder had been revealed. The party split up. Much to their horror, they found Zar dead in the observatory. Marcus arrived and screamed that he was going to be ruined. Ruined, I tell you. He requested that the bodies be moved out into the courtyard. Agar, Thelmus, and Marina all volunteered to move the bodies. As everyone continued to examine the area, they found dwarven footprints, which to Thurg confirmed that Twerpo had done it, even though there were several dwarves at this party. Many of the people at the party agreed things seemed to be pointing towards her, and things were once again getting heated, and Twerpo was once again being forced to try to convince everyone she did not do it. The party searched for more clues, and that's when they found the next body, Gorfel Boomstick. He'd been slain in the study, a pen shoved through their throat. Here, there was something unusual. There was no signs of a struggle. It's as if Gorfel just knew his attacker. Twerpo used Detect Magic as a ritual spell and noticed a glass sphere on the shelf held up by a wooden hand, and it radiated some form of illusionary magic. No one in the party felt safe picking it up, so they decided they'll just leave it there and maybe go back later and check it. The party, as in the players, were suspicious that perhaps Agar, Thelmus, and Marina might be involved in the killing with the Dwarf Prince. But that would quickly change when the next body found was Marina. She was found dead with a broken pull stick shoved through her chest. This was the fourth murder. Things were getting serious. Ellie began having Bubbles sniff around to try to pick up the scent, but due to the food, the people, and the activity happening, the scent proved too difficult to pick up for Bubbles, essentially a failed perception check for Bubbles. It wasn't long before another scream, followed by Ellie shouting for Bubbles, rang through the mansion. The next body found was that of Ebonhawk, who had been attacked from behind with a hippogriff head trophy, with the antlers running through his back and pinning him against the wall. Ellie sent Bubbles to check for the scent since he had a new body, and Bubbles wandered around and eventually stopped at Galen Silverblade. Ellie sent Bubbles to check for the scent again since he had a new body, and Bubbles wandered around and eventually stopped at Galen Silverblade. Ellie convinced the half-elf to allow her to search him and remove his boots and check for a weapon. Nothing was found. Ellie asked Marcus how this could be happening, and he explained he wasn't sure, but it couldn't be any of his guests. They had all been searched. No one should have had weapons and armor. This made Ellie chuckle a little bit because most of them had managed to smuggle in a weapon except for Calliope. Phelan used one of her magical spells called Sphere of Truth to determine who might be lying, and Bloom Furryfoot, who admitted to having a problem with Ebonhawk, said she saw Twerpo commit the murder. Phelan noted that as far as she could tell, Bloom was possibly telling the truth. So again, attention was turning towards Twerpo. This only encouraged Thurg and the party patrons to once again consider the fact that she was indeed behind the murder. During this time, Ellie returned to the ballroom since no one was there, and was able to free the Tabaxi and applied a mediocre disguise on the Tabaxi. The party continued to look for clues and found yet another dead body when Calliope found the body of Forge Ironbeard crammed into the fridge. Inspecting the kitchen revealed that if the attack had happened there was no evidence of it, indicating that perhaps Forge knew his attacker. Marcus arrived screaming that all these murders needed to stop, and now that the Tabaxi was gone also, and he didn't recognize the Tabaxi female due to the disguise, the party began to suspect that someone was using illusions to commit the murder. Ellie and Bubbles ventured outside where they found the body of Raina Foxhair, who had been strangled. That's when she heard a nearby door close and suddenly shouted, "Bubbles, the game is afoot!" She gave chase and found the door to be locked. She quickly picked the lock and opened the door and sent Bubbles to attack the person fleeing. Bubbles immediately caught up with the person and pounced, a natural 20, and held down the would-be fleeing person. It was Galen Silverglade, who Bubbles had pointed to earlier. Ellie questioned him hard, asking why he was running, and he explained he had just found a body of Rena and freaked out. When Ellie asked why he locked the door behind him, he explained because he thought Ellie was going to murder him. He thought Ellie was the murderer because she's friends with Twerpo, who everyone seems to think is the murderer. Returning to the study to look for further clues, they noticed that the sphere that Twerpo had detected as magical was now gone. While this was happening, Calliope and Alaric found yet another body, that of Aerith Banetrigger, in the stables. They searched the conservatory and found signs of a struggle. This looked to be something older. Searching around, they found a body that had shown signs of decomposing. That one of the workers, a human named Marcin. It dawned on Calliope and Alaric that Marcus had specifically said all of his guests were checked, but none of his employees were. Someone had done something to impersonate the employee to gain access to Marcus's estate. Calliope and Alaric joined the others in the dining room, where they managed to gather everyone that they could find, using bubbles to basically track anyone that was still alive. Torpo did detect magic again and found a glow in Galen Silverglade's pants. Now that sounds dirty, but it's actually in his pocket. Ellie quickly searched him and discovered that the sphere that had been in the study was in his pocket. Ellie decided without a way to know what it might do and risk what it could do. She had had a bad experience with magic in the previous session with the staff. She threw the sphere against the wall with all of her might, causing it to explode. The damage hurt her the most, as well as many of the other guests, as it shattered with a magical explosion. Phelan used her last second level spell to do another Sphere of Truth to determine what was going on, just as Marcus entered the room, horrified that his magical relic was now destroyed. He explained that the relic they had just destroyed allowed someone to peer through it and see a person's true form, and it could see through illusions as well as be able to identify such things as doppelgangers. The party learns that Galen Silverglade is not who he claims, and is, a matter of fact, a doppelganger, and that he and his accomplice, Mars Fallenstar, who turns out is also not who he appears to be, but another doppelganger. They both explain that they infiltrated Marcus's estate because they had heard through his constant bragging that he had secured the relic that allowed him to peer through the sphere and see anyone's true form, and that it was on its way to Ridgecrest. The doppelgangers, who now using Galen's form, had found and murdered Marcin, the employee, and took his form. Because he wasn't sure when the relic would arrive, he was frequently checking the study where it would be stored. During the party, they kept trying to get to the study to take it as employees, but were frequently seen by the guests and forced to basically walk away. The Aasimar began to suspect something because he saw this unusual behavior, and so he was the first one murdered. Once suspicion fell on Torpo, both doppelgangers took on Torpo's form and were moving throughout the house using her form. Gorfel was killed in the study because he had caught one of the doppelgangers, Galen, pocketing the sphere. Mars, who was in Zara's form at the time, got into an unintentional fight with Marina, who was a little drunk and decided to be confrontational. Mars, in Zara's form, was forced to kill her. Galen murdered Ebonhawk while his back was turned because he boasted of killing doppelgangers in the past as one of his heroic deeds. Forge, they admitted, was the first one killed. Mars took Forge's form first, initially pretending to be Forge during the dinner party, so Forge never actually made it to the dinner party alive. His body was simply found later and preserved due to the coolness of the fridge. Rena had gone to the gazebo to meet Aerith, and Rena was killed as Galen was trying to escape. His escape was further ruined when Ellie came out of the gazebo. Aerith was killed at the same time, but Mars had dragged her body to the stables and was going to drag Rena's body there until the commotion with Ellie happened. So Mars remained hidden and followed Ellie and Galen back inside the house in case he needed to kill Ellie. But cursed Galen had gotten himself captured. With all of this now revealed, the party turned to Marcus to say that they were going to arrest him for illegal trades, trafficking, smuggling, and an assortment of other crimes. Marcus laughed and changed his form, with horns appearing on his head, eyes flashing red, wings sprout from his shoulder, and a forked tail appeared in his reddish body. And it becomes very clear that Marcus is not human at all, but he is an incubus. The party realizes that they're now in for a big fight. Their big tank, the Barbarian, Trogdor, was not there, and most of them were without armor and basically had very basic weapons to use. But the party attacks, assisted by both Felina, who is furious that Marcus did this to her and her people, that is the Tabaxi, and Teleris, who is a paladin, and feels compelled to basically bring this incubus down. Felina has her claws and Teleris is reduced to punching. Marcus, as an incubus, proves that he is resistant to non-magical weapons as well as specific magical attacks. He does manage to grab Phelan with a natural 20 and pulls her close and kisses her, and siphons a portion of her soul. She suffers a great amount of necrotic damage. Alaric, in a panic, attempts to free her, but fumbles rolling a natural 1, and makes it worse by stabbing Phelan with the dagger. It's just then that the cursed blade that goes with the gauntlet appeared strapped on her back, sensing she was in danger. While Torpo, Calliope, and Phelan struck Marcus with magic, some of which was effect. Alaric and Ellie used their primitive weapons, which were daggers, along with Felina, who used her claws, and Talaris, who used his fists. But it was Alaric who delivered the final killing blow, finally killing Marcus. The party went to the library and recovered the rest of the volumes of books that Calliope had taken, and discovered that the languages were Abyssal and Celestial, and they came from the Broken Lands. This is an area far to the west. They also discovered a book that was out of place, and pulling on it, heard a noise elsewhere in the house. Between the ballroom and the dining room was a hidden chamber that was now revealed, and in it was a chest of gold. However, Ellie spotted a trap, and Torpo confirmed it was a magical trap that would trigger necrotic damage. After some struggles on how to spring the trap, Alaric told Phelan to get ready to save him, and he was just going to spring the trap. He had done so, which reduced his health. He succeeded his death save, and Phelan was able to basically cast Spare the Dying, giving the party a chance to save him and recovering 5,000 gold, which they split between themselves, as well as Talaris and Felina, who helped fight Marcus. And that was the end of the session we called Clue. Now, just for a fun fact, the Sphere of Seeing appeared in a previous adventure that I ran in one of the first campaigns I made for this world, with my best friend, his wife, my wife, and their kids. Those adventures happened 100 years previous to where this current adventure takes place. The Sphere of Seeing was lost at sea back then. Shortly after, Marcus found out about it and somehow acquired it for himself, and had added that relic to his collection. So, fun fact, it appeared elsewhere in a previous campaign many years prior. And that will do it for this session of Last Time on D&D.